Moving on to the next session of the day. It is titled as Essence of Ramayana, Mahabharata and Upanishads and the Puranas. And we will be in conversation with Padma Shri Bibek Debroy ji and Raghav Chandra ji. Now, let me brief you about the author. मैं चाहूँगा, yes, बिबेक जी यहाँ पे मौजूद है, उनका तालियों के साथ. Bibek Debroy ji is an author and Indian economist currently serving as the chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi ji. He is also an anchor for the fortnightly show Itihas on Sunset TV. Awarded the Padma, Debroy ji has translated the unabridged version of the Mahabharata into English in a series of 10 volumes. That is something I think calls for an applause. 10 volumes. He has also translated the Bhagavad Gita, the Harivamsa and the Vedas and the Ramayana in 3 volumes. He has also translated the Bhagavad Puran in 3 volumes, the Markandeya Puran, the Brahma Puran and the Vishnu Puran. So we are extremely delighted to have you with us. एक बार जोरदार तालियों से उनका स्वागत कीजिए, please. Delighted to have Mr. Raghav Chandra ji as a discussant for this session. He is the author of 2 acclaimed novels, Scent of a Game about tiger poaching and Kali's Daughter about caste consciousness. Raghav Chandra ji is a former civil servant, alumnus of Harvard University, founder CEO of Consult app, and of course, the captain of the ship, the director of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. I welcome both the gentlemen with a round of applause, and I would request them to please ignite the discussion.
Welcome aboard Bibek Debroy Saab. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to have you because we've been planning to have you over the last 4 years, and finally, जिसे कहते हैं कि संयोग सही बैठा, इसलिए आप यहाँ पर उपस्थित हैं. तो आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत भोपाल शहर में. आप आते रहे हैं, but the Bhopal Literature Festival is a relatively new knowledge event that has started in Bhopal, and I'm indeed delighted to have you because you personify scholarship, you personify a lot of human integrity in your character, as I've known you for so many years. From the time when I was Deputy Secretary in Ministry of Commerce and you were a professor in Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, you came and made a presentation. And of course, as a civil servant, one has been following your work and reading about you. Character and integrity and a general vision which is more than what most public administrators can really visualize and think and see. Perhaps it has got something to do with your very जिसे कहते हैं सांस्कृतिक शिक्षा आपने शुरू की थी in the नरेंद्रपुर रामकृष्ण मिशन स्कूल, and उसके बाद then you went to Kolkata Presidency College, the Delhi School of Economics, and to Cambridge University's Trinity College. All along your life has been one of scholarship, of academics, of being connected with spirituality, connected with India's history. So I'm going to ask you some questions to build up a knowledge for our audience as we go along about these kind of things, because you have done exceptional work. Before I come to your work, and all of us would like to know from you, what has been the inspiration behind your leanings towards India's past, India's cultural history, and India's scriptures, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Purans, and learning Sanskrit. Most modern people today don't learn Sanskrit, and it's such a great language, but हमको भी जब स्कूल में सिखाई जाती थी हम कभी उसको सीख नहीं पाए. तो sir, please tell us what inspired you to lean in this direction and to carve out a path which is so fulfilling and so useful for the country.
Thank you, Raghav, for that very kind introduction, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, indeed, this visit to the Bhopal Lit Fest has been pending for several years, and I'm thankful to the Bhopal Lit Fest and Raghav Chandra in particular for having finally made it happen. It's a bundle full of questions. Let me quickly react to the Sanskrit part of it, and then I'll come to the substantive part of it. I, strange though it may seem, have never formally studied Sanskrit. I decided to learn Sanskrit at the age of 45. Of course, I'm fairly fluent in Sanskrit now. We can have this entire conversation in Sanskrit. I believe that for anyone who knows any of the Indian languages, it is very easy to learn Sanskrit. The problem with Sanskrit is that it is very badly taught. If I ask you what is an Indian word for language, most of you will probably say bhasha. Bhasha is something that is spoken, bhasate. All of us learnt our respective languages by speaking it. We made mistakes. We were corrected. That's how we learn a language. Most of us here speak English. We did not learn English by mugging up Nesfield's grammar or Fowler. The worst possible way to learn a language is to mug up grammar tables. The structure of Sanskrit grammar is very, very logical and scientific. The trouble with the grammar tables is that the rationale for the grammar tables is realized only after you've attained a sufficient degree of proficiency in Sanskrit. You don't need to mug grammar tables. But the way it is taught is I will first have to learn Nara, Naro, Nara, Rama, Ramo, Rama, and that completely puts off students. The best way to learn Sanskrit is the conversational method. And particularly if you can understand the principles of Sandhi and Samasa. Sometimes we look at a long word and we do not understand what it means because Sanskrit is a free-flowing language. It flows like water. It does not want stops. Take a word like Swagatam. All of us are familiar with Swagatam, welcome. Swagatam is Su-agatam. Your arrival is desired welcome. Su-agatam. If you try to say it fast, Swagatam, Swagatam, it becomes Swagatam. I can give you a principle for that sandhi between Su and Agatam. But once you understand that the basic principle is this, then it becomes very easy to understand Sanskrit. So far as my getting interested in translating these texts are concerned, there are two kinds of answers I can give. One kind of answer is meant for a Western or a Westernized audience. The second kind of answer is meant for a Bharatiya audience. So let me give both answers. The answer for the Westernized audience is Sanskrit has a huge corpus of literature. Huge. The National Manuscript Mission, Namami, estimates that there are around 40 million manuscripts in India. 40 million. What percentage of these have been translated? 5%. 95% have still not been translated. Let me not give the impression that all of them are in Sanskrit. Some are in Pali also. These have not been translated. I personally possess a 13th century text, copy of a 13th century text, which I don't have the time to translate. It's called Chaurya Shastram. So as the name suggests, it's a manual for thieves. You have no idea of the kind of texts that were around. 95% have not yet been translated. The translations often started with Westerners. The series edited by Max Muller, Sacred Books of the East. What did they focus on? They focused on Vedanta, they focused on Upanishads, and of course a little bit of literature, Kalidasa. Now if you form your understanding on the basis of this, you will get the impression, which certainly floats around, that Hinduism is all about the other world. It is about moksha, it is about nirvana, it is about mukti. Hinduism does not have anything to do with daily living. Nothing can be further from the truth. Our texts say that amongst crores and crores of individuals, only a few will ever tread along that path of nirvana or mukti or moksha or liberation from samsara. The rest of us, thousands of years ago and today, will be engaged in samsara. We will be householders, we will be grihasthas, we will not go off to vanaprastha and sannyas. But the bulk of this literature, the Westerners did not translate. Hence, we are sometimes not even aware of this great corpus of literature which is about day-to-day life. And one of the sources for this is what is called Itihasa and Purana. Itihasa is a term that's used for the Valmiki Ramayana or the Ramayana in general and the Mahabharata. And the Puranas, perhaps we will talk about them, are 18 Mahapuranas. There are Upapuranas or minor ones also, 18 Mahapuranas that were composed, believed to have been composed by Veda Vyasa. The Mahabharata, according to popular perception, consists of 100,000 shlokas. The 18 Mahapuranas together amount to a colossal 400,000 shlokas, 4 times the size of the Mahabharata. The introduction mentioned my Mahabharata translation. It runs into about 2.25 million words. The Puranas together will amount to upwards of 12 million words. The Mahabharata has been translated in unabridged form into English only thrice. The other stuff that you see, they are all abridged versions.
Yes, I think Manmat Kumar Datta was one of them.
Datta and Kishori Mohan Ganguly. One of the people who translated it was a person named Van Buitenen. He died halfway. He was an Indologist, Sanskrit scholar from the University of Chicago. He died halfway. In the Mahabharata, there is a story, all of us are familiar with it, the Nala Damayanti story. When Van Buitenen translated it, in the Nala Damayanti story, the Mahabharata tells us that Kali, in the sense of evil, in the sense of wickedness, in the sense of dissension, entered Nala's body. Van Buitenen translated it as Kali. And I thought, what? Kali in the Mahabharata? And lo and behold, I checked up and it was not Kali, it was Kali. So, the I part, I as in I with a capital I, The ahang part, which is the version I give to the Westerners, is that it's completely negative if you only criticize the Westerners for getting the translations wrong. The positive thing to do would be for you to translate it, except that the Sanskrit Pandits are not interested in translating these, and the non-Sanskrit Pandits, people who are proficient with English, do not know enough of Sanskrit to be able to translate it. Now this is one answer. The answer that I give to a Bharati audience is, it is ahang to suggest that I took a decision to do any of this. Nimitra matrang bhava savva sachin. Destiny took me along this path. Simple.
Very good. Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. So talking about all these various scriptures and the manuscripts and so on, so we are told that there were 1259 versions of the Mahabharata which existed from different parts of the country. 1259 वर्जन्स थे और उनको भंडारकर ओरिएंटल रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट जिनसे आपका बहुत लगाव है, आई थिंक लार्ज पार्ट ऑफ योर दिस थिंग हैज़ बीन स्पेंट देयर ट्राइंग टू रिसर्च वेरियस स्क्रिप्चर्स. तो उसने सन 19 में 1919 they started the project for coming up with a critical Mahabharata, which they completed in Dr. Radhakrishnan launched it, I think in 1966 with 19 volumes. और वो उसका फिर ट्रांसलेशन आपने जो किया है सर, is that based on the critical version or any particular version of the Mahabharata? Could you tell us how you know, because it's a very interesting journey to know how this you got hold of the original or the correct text or the average or the broad, I mean statistically more accurate text, and were there many significant differences amongst the various versions, and how did they convey, the critical version convey authenticity, and how did your version which was translated convey the appropriate meaning to people?
You're absolutely right. The Mahabharata had many different versions. Now don't get me wrong. When I'm saying the Mahabharata, I mean the Sanskrit Mahabharata. There are non-Sanskrit versions of the Mahabharata throughout the country which have differences. This was all oral transmission. And as oral transmission happened, there were minor variations in the Sanskrit versions that existed in different parts of the country, and these were all in the form of manuscripts. Even when the language was Sanskrit, the script would sometimes also vary. It would be written in the Bengali script, the Sanskrit would be written in the Bengali script in Bengal, in the Marathi script in Maharashtra. Devanagari is of recent vintage. In Kashmir it would be written in the Sharda script, so on and so forth. There were very minor variations in these 1200 plus different versions of the Mahabharata, of the Sanskrit Mahabharata that existed. What do I mean by minor variations? Did Veda Vyasa actually dictate to Ganesha? When Draupadi was being disrobed, she prayed. Did she pray to an anonymous divinity or did she actually pray to Krishna by name? These kinds of minor differences. The Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute was explicitly set up with this agenda of sifting through all of these 1200 plus different versions of the Mahabharata to try and determine, to the extent you can at all determine, what may have been the original form of the Mahabharata. And the way they did this was very similar to something that we studied in school, HCF, the highest common factor. If a shloka occurred in several versions, the probability was high that it must have been part of the original. This is a technique that is used in studies on biodiversity and genetics also. On the basis of this, they actually started the work. The Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute was set up in 1916. They started the work in 1917 and completed it, as Raghav Chandra just said, in 1966. In the process, they removed some shlokas because they thought these shlokas were later interpolations. I earlier told you that the Mahabharata is believed to have 100,000 shlokas. This particular edition, which is called the critical edition, and please do not misunderstand and do injustice to Bhandarkar. Bhandarkar never claims this is the original, because we will never be able to determine that, and that is some subjectivity. It says it is the critical edition on the basis of these assumptions. That critical edition has 80,000 shlokas. So about 20,000 shlokas have been excised. They brought out the critical edition, but they've also published the other versions also in Sanskrit. So all of this we are talking about is in Sanskrit. The main critical edition, it has 7 volumes of dense Sanskrit text. With all the other variations, it amounts to 37 volumes.
Wow, that's enormous. And you, so now, gentlemen, आप लोग अब इमेजिन कर सकते हैं कि कितनी बड़ी एक्सरसाइज ये है. हम लोग रामायण महाभारत पढ़ते हैं तो छोटी छोटी किताबें पढ़ लेते हैं, सी राजगोपालाचारी का या किसी की, which are very nice, but they are more in story form. So, Mr. Debroy, you said that the Ramayana and Mahabharata are itihas. So I'll take you up on that, and when we say itihas, we mean that it's a narrative of facts that happened. How can we call, and I'm just giving a contrarian viewpoint, not necessarily my own, but I'm trying to provoke discussion. How do we call them itihas when they are preachings, and they convey a lot of preachings also? Because itihas is meant to be objective, and it is meant not to moralize or preach. So would you still feel that they are itihas, or would you think that they are just narratives? That's one question. And the second, why are they written in poem form and not in prose? Why is it that all our ancient texts, and this is something which I'm curious about, why are they all in poem form? So,
okay, itihasa, the word itihasa is itihasa, which is best translated as this is indeed what happened. So if I take that literal translation, itihasa is history. And no, none of these texts moralize. They don't. Moralization is when I tell you, this is what I believe is right, and everyone else should do that. No Hinduism text ever does that. That is a tradition associated with the religions that emanated from the Middle East. No Hinduism text ever says that. All of these texts that I am talking about, the Itihasa and the Purana, particularly the Puranas, they have extensive genealogies. Extensive genealogies. When we are talking about historicity, we should use the same ask for Sri Krishna's Aadhaar card and birth certificate. I should do exactly the same for Jesus Christ also. Beyond the texts, there are plenty of external sources of validation that are possible of the historicity. There are archaeological excavations. There are geological changes. There are even astronomical Everyone, almost everyone sings or croons or likes music. And naturally, poetry is very easy. So the prose came later. Now when it is poetry, please do understand that the structure of poetry in Sanskrit was completely different from that we come to identify as poetry today. Today poetry for us is rhyming. It is a lovely morning, but we are not in mourning. That kind of thing is not Sanskrit poetry. Rhyming was brought to Sanskrit poetry by Jayadeva. Before Jayadeva, it was not rhyming. It had a very strict metrical structure or chanda. And one of the problems is, because we have learnt English, we don't open our mouths. We do not, if you want to speak English, you have to keep your mouth closed. All Indian languages, Sanskrit included, you need to open your mouth. We have forgotten that thing of opening our mouth, so that when we are taught in school, choti e, bari e. If I am pronouncing it right, then why do I have to say choti e and bari? It should be obvious in the pronunciation. Anyway, Sanskrit aksharas had laghu, which is the choti e, and the dirgha, rasha and dirgha, choti and badi. So according to that, depending on how many rasha aksharas and dirgha aksharas there were in a line, and how many aksharas is a syllable with a single vowel sound, you had all kinds of different chandas. There were more than 1300 different chandas in Sanskrit. One of the simplest was Anushtup. Anushtup had 8 aksharas in each line. Simplest. This was the one that Adi Kavi Valmiki composed when he saw the hunter kill the croucher birds. Ma Nishada, all of us have heard that. This was the first shloka that was composed, and because it emanated from an act of sorrow or shoka, it came to be called shloka. So following that is the Anushtup structure 8. We recite mantras without realizing it is Anushtup. First shloka of the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre 8. Samavetayo Yutsava 8. Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu. All of this is Anushtup 8. And many melodies, even today, in non-Sanskrit songs, they follow the Anushtup. And this is the reason why most of these were composed in poetry, because it is so very easy.
So, all over Southeast Asia, our scriptures, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata story, the Puranas, the Upanishads have in some way or the other been disseminated. In Thailand, you have the city of Ayodhya, you have various other, places connected with the Ramayana and the Mahabharata all over. Today you have the Javanese tradition of the Ramayana ballet, you have the Balinese tradition. In fact, on the beach of Bali, I bought a full Ashok Vatika single piece wood sculpture at 6 a.m. in the morning because somebody came and sold it to me 95. I have found a taxi driver quoting the Gayatri mantra Om Bhurbhuva Swah Tatsa Viturvarenyam Bhargo Devas Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Prachodayat, and it's part of their ceremonies, even though a lot of them are Muslims sometimes. So what I'm surprised at is that despite the story of the Ramayana and our scriptures being part of the larger cultural consciousness of this region, we as a nation have not been able to further disseminate this, build on this to create and foster greater maitri between our nations. We are not now talking of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, but it could have been done earlier. Where really do you think we've not been able to do justice to this cultural consciousness which needed to be developed and further taken to a level which it deserves?
I'm glad you strictly speaking, not. Tat saviturvarenyam. Did you listen carefully? Om bhurvava swaha. Tat saviturvarenyam. Chanda breaks down. 7 aksharas. You will invariably hear Gayatri mantra recited like that. It's wrong. Chanda breaks down. If you paid attention to what Raghav did, Tat saviturvarenyam. Not. So he pronounced it correctly, which is why you are right to applaud him. Yes, particularly the Ramayana, and by the way, the Mahabharata in Sanskrit is only one. Ramayana has other Sanskrit versions also. The Rama story figures not only in Valmiki Ramayana, there is the Yoga Vasishtha Ramayana, there is the Adhyatma Ramayana, there is the Ramapakhan story in the Mahabharata, there is the Rama story in Raghuvansham. The Rama story also figures in Bauddha Jatakas and Jaina accounts. Yes, this soft power extended in many parts and left imprints that we sometimes don't even realize. If we have time, I'll tell you a story about canon. Mekong is actually named after Ma Ganga. I'm not making this up.
Mekong is the river in Southeast Asia which flows through Laos, Cambodia and so on.
Angkor Wat, the Wat part is Buddhist. Angkor is the same as Nagari, same root, Nagar. Let me tell you the story about canon, it's interesting. In Hinduism, there is a divinity called Avalokiteshwar. Avalokiteshwar in Hinduism is one of Shiva's manifestations. Avalokan is to look down from above, so Avalokiteshwar is a Lord who looks down on us from above. In Buddhism, Avalokiteshwar becomes a major divinity. So Buddhism goes to China. In China, as you know, if Raghav's name is to be converted into Chinese, they don't exactly translate Raghav. They figure out what the word Raghav means and do the corresponding Chinese name. That way it spread to South Korea, it spread to Japan. In Japan, in 1924, there was a camera manufacturing company called United Camera Manufacturing Company. And their icon as part of the brand, the company's name was called United Camera Manufacturing Company, but the icon was an image of Avalokiteshwar, which in this process of transfer had become Guanan. In 1925, they relaunched the company and decided that this icon was so popular that this Guanan, or whatever was the pronunciation, should become the name of the company, and that is Canon.
Oh.
Now the reason we have lost this parampara is even in 100 years ago, people were aware. People learnt this from their grandparents. It was part of whatever unofficial curricula there was. In the last 100 years, we have lost this. So to build on this knowledge of soft power, we need to be aware. So several Indians, when they pass through the Bangkok airport and they see this statue there of Samudra Manthan, will sometimes not even recognize what this is. They will think it is something that comes from Hollywood. So the fault is as much as with us as with anyone else.
Wonderful, absolutely. Now I'm coming to something more specific, for instance, which I'm familiar with. So Agastya Rishi in our scriptures, he plays a very major Vedas and is a character in the Brahmanas, Puranas, Upanishads and various other places. And he's supposed to have composed certain, parts of the Rig Veda. And in the Ramayana, he's the one who instructs Lord Ram and gives him the Aditya Hridaya Stotram to fight Ravan, which gives him the power to fight Ravan, and he wins and defeats Ravan. So now this is a thing which confuses sometimes, that a rishi is able to transcend various eras, and like for instance Narad Muni is supposed to, the conversation between Narad and Valmiki is supposed to have given Valmiki the kind of the energy and the Shakti to compose the Ramayana. So what is it that these rishis were able to transcend across time? So did they have a concept of circularity of time, and what was it? Or is it just that future writings, they have made it simple for us to say that वो एक एरा से दूसरे एरा चले गए और उन्होंने ऐसा बोल दिया, फिर वो प्रकट हो गए. Like महाभारत में characters appear, Ramayana में भी हनुमान जी appears. तो ये what exactly is happening here? And when you have such huge, tremendous characters, why do we need chota rituals to, worship the sun god and all that? When you have, why don't we just do mantras? I mean, why are we not being taught to just do mantras rather than fall prey to rituals? So I've given you a very complex sort of era to navigate, but be very happy with your learning. If you.
By the way, the Aditya Hridaya Stotram is beautiful. Whether you believe in the mantra for adhyatic purposes or not, there is a sheer poetic beauty to it. It's fantastic. You find it anywhere. When we look at names of rishis, one must realize, not just rishis, even kings, one must realize that it is not necessarily a proper name. It is an entire lineage which goes by that name, whether it is Agastya, whether it is Vasishtha, whether it is King Janaka, to whom Ashtavakra, the Rishi Ashtavakra taught the Ashtavakra. That King Janaka is not the same as the King Janaka who was Sita's father. So the entire lineage. By the way, Agastya is also a star in the sky, Alcor, I think. I'm not very sure whether it's Alcor. I think it's Alcor. Anyway. Now, our notion of time, there are two aspects to this. One aspect is that our notion of time is not linear. It is indeed circular, as you said. So hence there is intense philosophical speculation in all of our texts that can I ever decide what is cause and what is effect. You can determine what is cause and what is effect if I have a linear conception of time. If time is circular in nature, and the four yuga concept essentially reinforces it, then cause and effect have no meaning at all. What is cause and what is effect? Is a seed the cause or is it the effect? Is the tree the cause or is it the effect? When I look at a reflection of the moon in a vessel that has water in it, what is the cause and what is the effect? Is the vessel the cause? Is the still water the cause? Is the wind which does not move through the water and ensures that it is still the cause? Is it the sun which is the cause? What is the cause? Intense philosophical speculations. Our rishis are called Trikalagnyas. Trikalagnyas, we usually loosely interpret it as those who knew the past, the present and the future. Except Trikalagnya in this circular sense means, and it is impossible to comprehend this and grasp it, and if you grasp it, it turns your entire world topsy-turvy. The world we visualize is based on Newtonian classical mechanics, imbibed with a sense of certainty. Even in modern physics, the cosmic laws are completely different. Even in modern physics, the thermodynamic rules, when they apply to submolecular structures, behave completely differently. There is no certainty. So in this conception of time, the past, present and the future coexist. They are all here together. So this is the first thing that's important to grasp. They exist together. And if I'm looking at theories on physics, the mind boggles at the concepts of parallel universes. But that's very much a part of theoretical physics today. The second notion is that the time scale for humans is different for the time scale for devas and rishis. So there was this story about King Revata, whose daughter was Revati, who had gone off to Brahma's Sabha, was so charmed with the singing and the dancing there, he forgot that he was there to ask Brahma a question. And the question he was going to ask Brahma is, who should I get my daughter Revati married to? After the Gandharvas had finished their singing, after the Apsaras had finished their dancing, it was only a matter of one muhurta, which actually is 48 minutes. Brahma said, why have you come here? So King Revata said, I wanted your advice on who should I get my daughter married to, Revati married to. So Brahma said, who do you have in mind? He reeled off a list of names. Brahma smiled and said, my dear, while you have been here, yugas have passed on earth. And all these people are long dead and gone. And eventually Revati, of course, got married to Balaram. We read this and someone will say, myth. But if we read Einstein's theory of relativity, we will say, no, that is not myth. That is science. So if space and time are relative, and it comes courtesy Einstein, it is science. If space and time are relative, courtesy our Puranas, that of course is myth.
Wonderful. Before I throw this open to the house to ask you some very, very interesting questions, I'd just like you to pass on a message to the youth, especially who are here, in terms of how they can draw the best out of the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Upanishads, the Purana, and how they can cultivate basic knowledge of Sanskrit to be able to improve their careers, their futures, their personal lives. A sort of a seminal message from you, sir.
Well, the first thing is, please resort less to Google and the net. Google and the net and Wikipedia are not necessarily accurate. So if you are going to make judgments on Hinduism and its texts, do not believe what XYZ says. Do not believe what Raghav Chandra says. Do not believe what Bibek Debroy says. Read up the original. This is the first. Without reading up the original, do not please make generalizations. Secondly, it is not very difficult to learn Sanskrit, provided you do it via the conversational route. You will have read about this famous village in Karnataka where everyone speaks Sanskrit. Believe it or not, there are 700,000 households in India today who speak Sanskrit, meaning that conversation happens in Sanskrit. How did this happen? This came about through, I will call it a revolution, through a revolution that's been brought about by an organization called Sanskrit. The mothership, and it is not very difficult to learn.
Now we are going to take a few, 2 or 3 questions at best, because he has covered vast ground and we have to move over to another session. So please raise your hand. Girja ji, I see your hand, and being a lady, I think I'll give you preference over this gentleman.
Thank you so much. That was most enlightening. Now, Bibek, we were in Sri Lanka for 3.5 years, and what you just said in the end, Mama Nama, Sinhala is exactly the same. And when Sushma Swaraj ji came as foreign minister, and we were sitting, and having lunch, and she was translating everything that they said. Now, please throw some light on that. Sinhala and Sanskrit, there's obviously a big connection.
Before that, I'll just mention to आप लोगों के सबके लिए कि Mrs. Girja Sinha, she is the wife of Mr. Y.K. Sinha, जो हमारे देश के Chief Information Commissioner हैं और पूर्व में हमारे Ambassador थे श्रीलंका में. उस संदर्भ में she is asking this question.
तत् प्रश्नं नास्ति, मन्तव्यमस्ति, उत्तरं न आवश्यकम्.
Somebody here, आप पूछ लीजिए. हाँ. Yeah, बेटे. Yeah.
So first of all, thanks a lot for a wonderful deliberation you have given here. It is really eye-opening. My small question is that you just talked about the law of cause and effect, the cause and effect, and time is circular. Basically, I am a scientist working on space applications. So, as far as I read a little about Bhagavad Gita, the basic concept of Bhagavad Gita depends upon the karma. And karma theory, which is defined in this great book, that is based on cause and effect. The cause, that is the theory of karma. So can you please enlighten us with this concept relating with the cause of and effect?
If I am to properly answer that question, we'll be here for another 40 minutes, which I think Raghav does not have. So let me try and keep it simple, and I do not mean to be patronizing. I do not mean to be patronizing. There is a famous shloka, stotram, by Adi Shankaracharya, generally known as the Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhajamodamate. In the course of this, somewhere he says, Bhagavat Gita Kinchit Adhita Ganga Jalalava Kanika Pita. That I have interpreted dharma to mean to read a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita and to drink a few drops of Ganga Jal. And he makes the point that dharma is not that. I do not think anyone should read the Bhagavad Gita until one is ready for it inside. The Bhagavad Gita may be the most common Gita. There are around, Gita means something that is sung, and as we said earlier, many things were sung. Hence you need the adjective Bhagavat. There are 200 other Gitas, including about 20 plus in the Mahabharata itself. If I am interested in moksha dharma, I would say read the Ashtavakra Gita, which is direct. If I am a Grihastha, read the Dharmavyada Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita, please stay away from, do not dabble in it until the Bhagavad Gita discovers you. You don't discover the Bhagavad Gita. So far as the notion of karma is concerned, there has been intense philosophical speculation. The moment I say cause and effect, the cause is where the chain starts. Effect is where the chain ends. Our notion of karma has an endless chain. So it defies this modern science's notion of cause and effect, which restricts it to a designated time scale. So it's an endless sequence of karma. This gets into intense philosophical speculation, also familiar in the West, on the notion of free will versus determinism. So the notion of karma would require another 40 minutes, but it is not as simple as here we start, this is the cause, here we end, this is the effect.
Maybe one last question. Shlok Chandra. Please use the mic.
So between Mahabharata and Ramayana, we have many great characters. For example, we have Yudhishthir known for his integrity. We have Arjun known for his focus. We have Lakshman and Hanumanji known for their loyalty. So who is the one character that you would, according to you, is the most worthy of emulation between the two scripts?
I think the person worthy of emulation is you yourself. However, you should realize that the protagonists in the Mahabharata, they are much more complicated. They are subjected to moral dilemmas of the kind we confront every day, so we empathize much more with the characters of the Mahabharata. But do realize the characters in the Mahabharata also evolve as the Mahabharata proceeds. The Yudhishthira of Sabha Parva is not the Yudhishthira of Aranya Parva. The Ramayana has harder norms in terms of human values. A Rama is much more difficult to emulate. A Rama is much more difficult to understand. A Lakshmana is much more difficult to understand and emulate. Ditto for a Sita. So again I repeat, be careful of generalizations, particularly in relation to the earlier question, Raghav, that you asked. That if you are going to ask, why did Rama vanish Sita? Fair question to ask. But you should also ask, why did Rama vanish Lakshmana? He did that. Not too many people know that. And I am citing this not to start a debate, but to illustrate the point that please read the texts. Do not read Google.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद विवेक जी. हमें करतल ध्वनि के साथ उनका आभार प्रकट करना चाहिए.
Big hand, gentlemen.
मैं मीनाक्षी दुआ जी को मंच पे आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगा और मैं चाहूँगा सम्मान स्वरूप हम विवेक जी को एक मेमेंटो पेश करें.
Mrs. Bibek Debroy is also here. May I kindly also invite her on the stage?
Yes, please. उनके लिए भी तालियां होनी चाहिए. एंड मैं हमारे ऑथर को और सभी ऑडियंस को फिर से बताना चाहूँगा, दिस मेमेंटो happens to be the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, sir. Yes, please. Meenakshi Duaji, the member of Society for Culture and Environment. And जो ये पिक्चर आप देखने वाले हैं, it happens to be a picture of a highly endangered bird called Lesser Florican. There it is, the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival 2023. The beautiful picture. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद विवेक जी, राघव जी,
These are his books. And
Mrs. Debroy ji and
available in the bookstore.
Meenakshi ji. Thank you so
can
much.
Get them signed by him outside.
थैंक यू सो मच. जोरदार तालियां. करतल ध्वनि से हम आभार प्रकट करते हैं फॉर सच एन insightful discussion. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Next session is titled as Backstage Glimpses of High Strategy and Power. Mr. Montik Singh Ahwalia will be in conversation with Mr. Rajiv Kumar. If we have the author and discussion for this session here with us, I would like to invite them to the dais.